Up until recently, corporate media and ivory tower elites have held what seemed to be a monopoly on the flow of information. If you wanted to hear an opinion on a contentious matter, you would have to turn on the corporate media platform of your choosing, and you would be spoon-fed an acceptable position on the topic at hand. For a good long while, this arrangement served corporate interests quite well. As Noam Chomsky and Edward S. Herman put it in their 1988 book, Manufacturing Consent, the mass media serve as a system for communicating messages and symbols to the general populace. It's their function to amuse, entertain, and inform, and to inculcate individuals with the values, beliefs, and codes of behavior that will integrate them into institutional structures of the larger society. In a world of concentrated wealth and major conflicts of class interest, to fulfill this role requires systematic propaganda. This model of subtle propaganda and gatekeeping of serious discussion has fallen out of favor in recent years due to the rise of alternative media figures and platforms. From YouTube to Twitter to Rumble for the really bad boys, these alternative media platforms have proven to resonate quite well with the average person. And for good reason. People have begun to see through the elitist corporate stronghold that traditional media held over the flow of information for decades. And for a lot of people, they've become disillusioned with the status quo that those institutions were propped up to protect. People are tired of feeling as though serious political conversation can only be reserved for ivory tower elites and fucking Anderson Cooper. So when they hear a seemingly down-to-earth guy like Joe Rogan talk with his buddy who has an interest in politics or aliens or what have you, it's easy to resonate with them and latch on to folks like that for insight on current events and world news. Same goes for his contemporaries, who seem to offer an alternative to the polished media institutions of old and instead sell you their personalities, ranging from humble and inquisitive to whatever this is. However, as we've recently seen, these alternative media ecosystems very quickly begin to replicate the undesirable aspects of traditional corporate media. From sketchy funding to audience capture, independent media has proven not to be immune to the shortcomings of its predecessor. But worst of all, these alternative media spheres are a breeding ground for anti-intellectualism. I know that sounds like a really elitist word, but I do think it's important to know what it means and how to spot it in the wild. Anti-intellectualism is hostility to and mistrust of intellect, intellectuals, and intellectualism, commonly expressed as deprecation of education and philosophy and the dismissal of art, literature, history, and science as impractical, politically motivated, and even contemptible human pursuits. Anti-intellectuals may present themselves and be perceived as champions of common folk, populists against political and academic elitism, intend to see educated people as a status class that dominates political discourse and higher education while being detached from the concerns of ordinary people. Sound familiar? This is the entire MO of Alex Jones, Tucker Carlson, and the like. Anti-intellectualism, with its disdain for science, embrace of conspiracy theories, and us versus them mentality.
Flat Earth.
What I'm telling
if you're on a flat Earth, you could travel anywhere. Give me two cities.
Eddie,
you point at two cities and you just
we've
go
been
there.
lied to so much, I get what you question.
Is the foundation of reactionary politics and a driving force behind the rise of the far right.
I thought Churchill was the chief villain of the Second World War.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
But this video is not about Joe Rogan, Alex Jones, or Tucker Carlson. It's actually about a subset of alternative media that I like to refer to as SlopTube. I didn't coin this term, but SlopTube typically refers to content creators, not necessarily just YouTubers, who create run-of-the-mill drama commentary or pop culture content, typically from what they claim to be an apolitical perspective. SlopTube content ranges from covering interpersonal beefs between YouTubers, all the way over to political commentary that's supposed to be somewhat centrist, but often carries water for the right. I don't use the term SlopTube as a pejorative. I actually engage in the slop every now and then. I think there are certain creators in this realm who do a really good job. I also concede the point that left-wing YouTube or BreadTube or whatever it's called is definitely home to some annoying motherfuckers, so you don't need to convince me on that. But the reason I want to look into SlopTubers for this video is because they benefit from a very special type of defense. Let's call it weaponized ignorance. It's where they utilize their position as ostensibly apolitical content creators to shield themselves from criticism when they throw their hat in the ring on serious political conversations. They may not even know that they benefit from this, but regardless of their intentions, their positions in the online ecosystem allot them this privilege. Again, I don't think it's wrong for them to cover contentious political topics. I'm actually happy that they do because I think there's things that we can all learn from each other, and discussion shouldn't be stifled due to a perceived lack of credentials. But my point here is that they should treat serious topics with the respect they deserve. That includes backing up their statements with sources, and when they get something wrong on a contentious subject, issuing a correction.
Hezbollah is credited with about 500,000 deaths in Syria.
Let's ask our friend ChatGPT.
I've looked into this pretty extensively. Hezbollah is killed significantly more people by almost like 10 times, I think. I mean, we don't know the exact numbers coming out of Gaza at the moment. I'm trying to dry off the jack. Are you reading something contradictory, AB?
Yeah, I mean, ChatGPT says overall, due to the scale of frequency of IDF operations over decades, they have likely caused more Muslim casualties than Hezbollah.
No shot. Hold on. What was the question you asked it?
Hezbollah versus IDF, who has killed more Muslims?
Ask if it's including the Syrian civil war. I mean, that makes no sense. I've literally fact-checked this a million times, I feel like.
In reality, their positions as drama creators actually serve as a shield for them when they irresponsibly cover a serious topic. Like I said, weaponized ignorance. You can think of it as a cousin to anti-intellectualism in the way that it shuns responsible inquiry, and in many instances keeps these creators insulated from having to actually put the work in to appropriately research the topics they broach. Often, these creators dabble in these topics not because they have a genuine concern for the subject at hand or because they cherish journalistic integrity, but because it's an easy way to get views and, more importantly, it's an easy way to stake out a position contrary to a creator they dislike and use contentious political topics as a proxy for personal issues, as we will see later in this video. Keep in mind, this apolitical veneer requires these creators to lend credence to the narrative that the far left and the far right are equally morally objectionable.
I'll tell you who we're talking about. You don't think Hassan has influence online?
Of course he does,
He's
yeah.
mainstream.
For sure.
So this is like Donald Trump hanging out with Nick Fuentes. Like, you don't think that matters?
Which results in this stupidity being parroted by their viewers.
I believe the biggest streamer on the left, Hassan Parker, he's just extremely, radical, and gets people just really worked up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, how about we look on the right? Nick Fuentes. Which one do you think
That's
is
a
more
good point.
harmful?
Honestly, between them, Hassan Parker, he literally plays
Hassan Parker? What? You don't even know his last name.
I'm so sorry, but saying that like Hassan produces worse outcomes for society than a neo-Nazi that loves Hitler and gets like 40,000 viewers is absolutely radical.
In their chase for clicks and relevance, their audience is left with a hodgepodge of half-baked ideas and little nuance about the topics their favorite creator just introduced them to. So, in a bit of an ironic twist, I'm going to cover some SlopTubers to highlight examples of this behavior, which I guess makes me the SlopTuber this time. Sorry. The main creators I want to focus on in this video are the live streamer Asmongold, Mutahar from the YouTube channel SomeOrdinaryGamers, and the very well-known YouTuber and podcaster Ethan Klein of H3H3 Productions. These three people are in no way the only creators who exhibit this behavior, but they will serve as great examples of what I'm talking about. The reason I want to focus specifically on them is because their stories are somewhat intertwined, and they have all at some point in the past year and a bit made content that broaches the very serious geopolitical topic that is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So before we start, I need to fill you in on some context and explain how we got here. Back in 2021, subject of this video, Ethan Klein, was one half of a political podcast called Leftovers. His co-host was the left-wing commentator Hassan Piker. Now, their podcast was, in my opinion, very enjoyable. It benefited greatly from the dynamic between the two. Ethan came across as the well-intentioned, slightly left-leaning funny guy, and Hassan assumed the role of the more seasoned political commentator. The podcast came to an end in late 2023, largely due to the October 7th attack in Israel. I'm not going to go into detail about how exactly this show and their friendship came to an end because it's not the most important part of this video, and frankly, I don't care much about the interpersonal drama between them. But in a nutshell, Ethan lived in Israel for a bit, and his wife, Ela, served in the IDF, while Hassan is a vocal advocate for the Palestinian plight. After October 7th, 2023, Ethan began making statements that many interpreted as tacit defenses of Israel, sparking backlash from his progressive fan base. He compared the organization Jewish Voice for Peace to capos.
The reason why I brought up Jewish Voice for Peace and other groups using this as well, like Jews themselves in America using this anti-Zionist slogan, indicates that this slogan isn't one that is about the evisceration of Jews. If that was the case, then they wouldn't use it.
There was Jewish collaborators with fucking Nazis.
Ethan, don't do that, please. Don't say that the Jews' Voice for Peace are akin to capos.
Made a disturbing remark about Aaron Bushnell by saying he burns alive really good.
Not to put this uncouth, but he's a champ at fucking burning alive. I mean, and that sounds bad, but he did it really good.
And echoed Ben Shapiro-style talking points by telling a pro-Palestinian sex worker that Hamas would kill him on the spot. As if this would, convince the guy to support Palestinian oppression? I don't know what Ethan's trying to do here. Ethan's brand of liberal Zionism increasingly alienated many of his progressive viewers. He later blamed Hassan for this shift, claiming that Hassan's more leftist politics had radicalized the audience into disagreeing with him. Ever since this, Ethan has relentlessly attacked pro-Palestinian advocates.
I am so proud to be marching with so many Jews.
Yes, the Jews! The Jews are here! Did we mention that?
Mm-hmm. And I hope he is fired.
Socialists, Marxists.
Karl Marx, I got a fucking lot to say about that dipshit. Mao was a dumb bitch. What the fuck did he do? Actually, he did a lot. He helped China a lot, but at what cost? He did a lot for China, I think. I don't know a lot about it.
And pretty much anyone to his left, denouncing them as radicals, anti-Semites, and terrorist sympathizers. He's even gone so far as to make a nearly 2-hour video titled Content Nuke Hassan Piker, in which he propagates lie after lie about Hassan, Palestinian history, the Nakba, and so on. But we'll get back to this later. Despite all this, Ethan still claims to be a stalwart supporter of the Palestinian cause.
I've been a stalwart supporter of the Palestinian cause for many years.
And the reason he feels this way is because he's critical of the current Netanyahu government and he supports a two-state solution. But as has been noted by Iraqi-Israeli historian Avi Shleim and many others like him, by its settlement expansion, Israel effectively killed the two-state solution. What is left of the West Bank is a collection of Palestinian enclaves surrounded by Israeli settlements and military bases that cannot form a viable state. In short, the two-state solution is dead, or to be more accurate, it was never born. The outcome I have come to favor is one democratic state between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean Sea, with equal rights for all its citizens regardless of ethnicity or religion. Proponents of a two-state solution also often tend to overlook the right of return for the over 7 million Palestinian refugees and their descendants living outside the Israeli-Palestinian borders, despite UN Resolution 194 affirming their right to return to their homes if they so choose. Apart from this, focusing solely on Netanyahu or the far right in Israel obscures the broader reality. The foundational project of Israel is one of ethno-religious supremacy and ethnic cleansing. Even relatively liberal or supposedly peaceful Israeli leaders are guilty of atrocities. To ignore that is to miss the forest for the trees. Ethan opposes lifting the blockade on Palestinians because he believes they would resort to violence if given the chance.
A one-state solution just eliminates like one internal faction that is an ever-present danger. And
You're telling me if we were to lift the blockade and the wall around Gaza today, there wouldn't be more violence against Israelis?
But this ignores a crucial reality. Palestinians have endured brutal oppression. That oppression needs to end. And while some have responded with violence, it's a response to systemic abuse, not some innate desire to harm Israelis. Framing Palestinians as inherently violent and incapable of integrating into a democratic state isn't just wrong, it's racist. As we'll see in this video, Ethan's analysis of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is steeped in Eurocentrism and reveals what seems to be, if I'm going to be very charitable, a subconscious belief in Western superiority. But first, let's introduce the other two subjects of this video. Speaking of holding a belief in Western superiority, this is Asmongold, a live streamer known for bangers such as,
if you want to consider a genocide as a systematic killing of a group of people, they have genocide built into Sharia law right now. So no, I'm not going to cry a fucking river when people who have genocide that's baked into their laws are getting genocided. I don't give a fuck. They're terrible people. These people are not your allies. They are not the same as us. They come from an inferior culture that is horrible. It kills people for their identity, and it is directly antithetical to everything Western values stand for, and it is an inferior culture in all ways.
Yikes. Asmongold's house looks like this, by the way. I'll just leave that on the screen for a second so you can get a glimpse of the superior Westerners' living quarters. Now, it is true that Asmongold has apologized for this horrendous statement, and at the time seemed as though he would try to be more careful when dealing with serious issues going forward, but it wasn't long before he was back on the scene with more bullshit. From joking about rounding up migrants dressed as Ash Ketchum.
What is the probability that Tom Homan would let me go with him dressed up as Ash Ketchum with watching them do deportations?
To saying shit like, the Holocaust probably happened.
I think the Holocaust probably happened. I think probably 99% certainty it happened.
To engaging in revisionist history by way of arguing that the Nazis didn't burn books to stifle what they believed to be degeneracy, but rather because those books were, quote, written in Jewish.
The Nazis burned books on gender sciences.
They did do that.
First. Now the administration has villainized and marginalized migrant workers, trans...
It's a bit of a miss. Like, my understanding is that they burned them not because it was gender stuff, but because it was written in Jewish and not German.
This guy is an unstoppable force of stupidity, but a very popular one, with millions of followers and dozens of thousands of people who watch every one of his live streams. These callous and irresponsible statements are being consumed by his massive audience of mostly young, impressionable men. Mr. Gold here is able to evade the scrutiny he deserves merely due to his position in the media ecosystem. He's a content creator who plays video games and complains about how wokeness is ruining them. If the things he said were said on corporate media or by someone with a reputation of serious political commentating, that would be the end of their career. If Jake Tapper or even Jesse Waters said that they were 99% sure that the Holocaust happened, they would probably get canned and have to stake out a new career as an alt-right creator on Rumble. But when Asmongold says it, well, it's just Asmongold. The other creator I want to touch on quickly before we get back to Ethan Klein is this guy, Mutahar. Now, admittedly, Mutahar is not as bad as Asmongold or even Ethan, but he too displays a degree of what seems to be a subconscious belief in Western superiority when he chooses to dabble in political commentary. Remember what I said about how these guys approach these sensitive topics in a centrist, ostensibly apolitical way, purely for the sake of creating more drama slop content that ultimately ends up holding water for the right? Well, here's an example of Mutahar doing just that. In October of 2024, Mutahar posted a video called "Twitch is a Disgustingly Evil Platform," in which he attacked left-wing creators and broached the topic of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. At the time, Twitch was being accused of being anti-Semitic. These are claims that I believe to be baseless. Twitch was just highlighting pro-Palestinian voices and creators, some of which were Jewish themselves, and this anti-Twitch hate campaign was largely fueled by this stalwart supporter of the Palestinian cause, Ethan Klein. In Mutahar's video on the topic, he starts it out by saying,
"Now, this is in regards to serious world-shattering events that, again, I'm not an expert in, so I'm going to kind of tread lightly in this situation."
He acknowledges that he will be broaching serious subject matter that he is ill-equipped to deal with, which is fine and can be done responsibly, but again, his position as a drama tuber, whether he's aware of it or not, insulates him from even having to try to cover things in a nuanced and responsible way. I mean, the video starts off with Mutahar minimizing Asmongold's genocidal statements, and then he immediately shifts to relentlessly attacking pro-Palestinian advocates. If you're gonna make a video adjacent to the genocide in Gaza, could you at least emphasize the severity and wrongdoings of the state of Israel as it exterminates dozens of thousands of innocent people? At least throw up a fucking headline or something. It's true that he pays a little lip service to what's happening in Palestine toward the end of his video.
I'm not somebody that is afraid to say that genocide is wrong. I think that there is an actual case of, genocide, and there's an actual case of attack that goes towards the Palestinian people. I think there's very serious situations that go around the world.
But that's only after he, A, spends the first leg of the video doing apologia for and minimizing Asmongold's statements, as we will get into soon. B, spends the rest of it attacking the creators who are actually trying to bring attention to the genocide in Gaza, a genocide our Western governments are complicit in, by the way. And C, does both sides are bad type bullshit by saying that Jews and Muslims are just at each other's neck, man. That's the way it's always been for centuries.
These are situations that involve, a group of people, Muslims and Jews, that have effectively been at each other's throats for not just decades, but hundreds of years. You are talking about hundreds of years of, just institutional dislike between each other. If you've ever grown up Muslim, and I have, then you know that there is a serious culture of anti-Semitism, in amongst the most conservative of Muslim circles. Just as you will know that there is a serious amount of Islamophobia in the most right-wing of Jewish circles. These are two groups of people that literally are just fighting each other.
But this analysis ignores so much historical context that it's outright irresponsible. Look no further than the Ottoman Empire, where Jews were a protected minority and had representatives in the Ottoman parliament. As our boy Avi put it, unlike Europe, the Middle East did not have a Jewish question. Anti-Semitism was a European malady that later infected the Near East. Jews and Muslims coexisted in many Middle Eastern countries for centuries. It wasn't until the arrival of European colonial settlers in Palestine in the late 1800s and later the formation of the State of Israel and the violence and ethnic cleansing carried out by Zionist forces that began to change. It's true that animosity towards Jewish people picked up as a response to Zionist settlers arriving in Palestine, but that tension had little to do with ideological anti-Semitism and nearly everything to do with the perception of Zionist settlers as part of a European colonial project. This idea that Jews and Muslims are incapable of coexisting is a dishonest narrative. It's weaponized to stoke far-right nationalism, and in Mutahar's case, it's being used to both sides a genocide. It was the interjection of the Europeans into the Middle East that introduced complex political animosities. When you leave that part out, you are lending credence to some very dangerous narratives. Stripping this conflict of its colonial and imperial roots doesn't just distort history, it hands ideological ammo to ethno-nationalists, legitimizing apartheid and occupation as if they were just natural outcomes of ancient hatred, rather than deliberate political choices. This is a great example of how trying to forcibly stake out a centrist position because you think it adds a veneer of nuance can actually undermine real nuance and give cover to some shitty ideas. Moving on. I don't think it's too much to ask for Mutahar if he's going to broach this serious topic to at least fill us in on the severity and details of what's actually happening in Gaza, especially if he's going to rack up 1 million views by shitting on these crazy woke Palestinian advocates. By all means, broach serious topics, but brother, you have millions of subscribers and the ability to shed light on the severity of the suffering being inflicted on these innocent people. But I guess it's better for the algorithm if you just take aim at a guy like Hassan Piker instead. All these SlopTube guys really fucking hate this dude. Some of them are genuinely obsessed. Take Nux, for example. He's a... What is this, a cartoon? Who has millions of subscribers across 2 channels and churns out videos about things like Snow White going woke, IRL streamers like Vitali and Johnny Somali, and of course, an unhealthy amount of videos about Hassan Piker. Like, way too many to count. Nux is also a little more openly right-wing than your average SlopTuber, and he regularly feels the need to educate us on contentious political matters, which I'm super grateful for because where else would I develop my understanding of fucking trade protectionism?
In the long term, this is bringing unbelievable wealth and industry to the United States.
It's worth noting that he and his contemporaries rarely, if ever, actually back up their claims. Just look at this description box. No sources, just a polemic descriptor about how Democrats are cooked, Doge Lord Elon Musk, and what seems to be a bunch more SEO ranking terms. And then he has the gall to claim that his video is for educational purposes. Maybe I'm just being a dick, but is it really too much to ask that when we make definitive statements about contentious political or economic issues, we substantiate those claims somehow? Especially if we're going to make quote-unquote educational videos. Anyway, back to Mutahar. In his video, he calls out a pro-Palestinian creator by the name of Frogan, who said this about American soldiers.
I have no pity at all for any fucking soldiers. U.S. military? Boo fucking who? I hope you get PTSD. The U.S. military that are like, yeah, like, you know, I did this back then, but now I know it's wrong. Like, I'm changed. Like, fuck imperialism. Fuck this. You don't deserve the PTSD. But like any other motherfucker, you're joining them. You're like, oh my god, I want my fucking Camaro, no student loans. Fuck you.
Is what she said crude and callous? Yeah, sure. I would never co-sign the wishing of mental health issues onto anyone, but let's examine where a statement like hers comes from. Frogan is a creator of Lebanese descent whose family fled the Israeli-Lebanese war. Is it really that hard to understand why a person of not only Lebanese descent, but of Middle Eastern, Latin American, African, or Asian descent might feel a hatred for the imperial, murderous US military that has infected their politics, bombed their countries, or outright occupied them for decades? Mutahar seems to think so. He had this to say about Frogan's take.
Oh, how out of touch do you gotta be? How privileged do you gotta be to sit there on your ass in California and just badmouth the people that take a bullet for your freedoms every single day? The most outrageous shit you'll ever hear.
Just for reference, here is Mutahar's very charitable coverage of Asmongold saying that he doesn't care if Palestinians get genocided because he believes they have an inferior culture.
I just want to preface, Zach Asmongold has pretty much walked these things back and, has apologized for it. In this situation, one could, if they were to extend the charitability could say that Asmongold was probably referring to extremists in the Islamic religion and their view on people in the LGBTQ camp, all right?
And let's take another look at how he responded to Frogan.
Oh, how out of touch do you gotta be? How privileged do you gotta be to sit there on your ass in California and just badmouth the people that take a bullet for your freedoms every single day? The most outrageous shit you'll ever hear.
This is all in the same video, by the way. Where did all the charitability and nuance go? Instead, he goes on a diatribe about how the American military takes a bullet for her freedoms every single day. I'm sorry, Mutahar, but A, you're fucking Canadian, and I can say it like that because I am too. B, are you aware of what the US military has done to the Middle East? And C, since you want to dip your hand in the political cookie jar, I challenge you to name me a single time post-World War II when the American military fought to protect the American homeland and the civil freedoms of its people. Which US military intervention fought for her freedoms? Now, there is a conversation to be had about the poverty draft and how the US military preys on underprivileged people and communities and recruits them to sell their bodies into an imperial force. Yes, absolutely. But when that imperial force goes on to victimize entire regions of the world, you shouldn't be surprised when a person who is a descendant of one of those regions has negative feelings towards the US military. Frogan also went on to apologize for her callous remarks, and here is how Mutahar responded to that.
Actually, after some backlash, this complete dipshit comes out and goes, I realize that wishing people harm isn't the best way to talk about these issues. Really? Really? Wow! And these people are supposed to be the fucking intellectual bastions on the internet.
Now again, let's contrast this with the way he accepted Asmongold's apology.
In this situation, one could, if they were to extend the charitability, could say that Asmongold was probably referring to extremists in the Islamic religion and their view on people in the LGBTQ camp, all right?
No, I'm not going to cry a fucking river when people who have genocide that's baked into their laws are getting genocided. I don't give a fuck. They're terrible people. It is an inferior culture in all ways.
So let's get this straight. Asmongold denounces an entire culture as inferior and explains how he doesn't care if they get killed, and Mutahar has it in his heart to be charitable, which is fine. That's his prerogative. But when someone from Lebanese descent says something mean about an army known for bombing and occupying the Middle East, Mutahar's charitability is all dried up. That checks out. Is the point of Mutahar's video to foster genuine understanding and shed light on the horrific atrocities the Israeli state is inflicting upon the people of Palestine? Or is it just to score cheap shots at creators who are actively speaking out against the genocide Israel is currently committing? You tell me. This is not to say that you can't criticize people just because they support the Palestinian plight. You absolutely can and should if they deserve it. But when 99% of your coverage on issues adjacent to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict consists of hyper-focusing on pro-Palestinian internet creators, and the only thing you have to say about a literal genocide is, I think genocide is wrong, but Muslims and Jews just don't get along, man, it is fair for me to call your priorities into question. Now let's move on to the main event. Ethan Klein. This video is not meant to debunk every inaccurate Zionist talking point Ethan has pushed over the past 18 months. Instead, it's meant to illustrate how his role as a drama slop creator lets him use serious political issues as proxies for personal beefs, avoid doing any rigorous research, and spew Western-centric nonsense to an audience of normies. If you want a detailed rebuttal of all his claims, there are many great YouTubers who have already done so. Creators like Chris Kunzler, Disinformation Tracker, and more. YouTuber Noah Samson did a really great job of using Ethan's content nuke slop video as a launching point to refute Ethan's lies and shed light on the atrocities Israel is currently committing. I'll link these videos below. One specific claim of Ethan's that really broke my brain is when he asserted that more Jews were displaced during the Nakba than Palestinians.
If the Jews didn't come from Europe after the Holocaust, they came from the surrounding Arab countries that expelled them in massive amounts following the 1948 war. In fact, there was more Jews displaced than Palestinians during the Nakba.
This specific claim is so absurd that I can't not include it in this video. Like I said, it has been refuted by the creators I mentioned earlier, but I want to quote Avi Schleim once more in regard to this claim. Zionists are driven by the propaganda need to portray the Jews as the victims of endemic Arab persecution, a portrayal that is then used to justify Israel's own atrocious treatment of the Palestinians. A rich, fascinating, and multi-dimensional history is thus reduced to a quest for ammunition to use in the ongoing war against the Palestinians. This trend reached its climax with the manufacture of the narrative of the Jewish Nakba. According to this narrative, the forced exodus of 850 150,000 Jews from Arab countries after 1948 amounted to a catastrophe, a Jewish Nakba, at least on par with, if not more devastating in its consequences than the Palestinian Nakba. Variously called the Forgotten Exodus, the Forced Exodus, or the Double Exodus, the purpose of this narrative is to create a false symmetry between the fate of two communities. This narrative is not history, it's the propaganda of the victors. Honest history has to acknowledge the part played by all the governments concerned in causing this man-made tragedy. The main difference is that the Palestinian refugees, for the most part, were ethnically cleansed by the Israeli armed forces, whereas Arab Jews, with a few exceptions, were given by the Arab governments the option of leaving or staying. Ethan also forgets to mention the fact that Palestinians were being ethnically cleansed well before the Nakba, also known as the catastrophe. Zionist paramilitary terror cells like the Haganah and its offshoots like the even more extreme Irgun were ethnically cleansing Palestinians before 1948, and those terror cells were later absorbed into the IDF. Ethan's framing obscures the true nature of Jewish migration to Palestine. If you take his words at face value, you might come away thinking, well, the Palestinians were expelled, the Jews were expelled, it's just a complicated mess of mutual displacement. But that kind of moral flattening is exactly what the Zionist narrative relies on to justify what actually happened. Palestinians were ethnically cleansed, which contributed to a reaction from many Arab-majority countries, prompting Jews to seek a new life in Palestine. Jewish migration to Palestine had already been taking place for decades by this point and ramped up after 1948. It wasn't some immediate population switch, as Ethan implies. The Zionist movement actively promoted Jewish migration through controversial methods. Some historians claim these include false flag operations to create pretexts for mass immigration of Jews from Arab countries to Israel. This entails staging attacks on Jewish targets in Arab countries and blaming them on local Arab communities as part of a broader strategy to increase Israel's Jewish population and solidify a Jewish majority. And to make things worse, these Arab Jews were mistreated horribly by their European counterparts once they arrived in Israel. They were solely there to secure the viability of a demographic majority. A particularly troubling example of this was the mistreatment of Yemeni Jews. During and after Operation Magic Carpet, thousands of Yemeni Jewish children disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Parents were told that their children had died from illness, but growing evidence suggests some were secretly given to wealthy childless Israeli or American Jewish families. Others likely did die, but due to severe neglect, and their deaths were handled with shocking cruelty and insensitivity. Some reports claim children were used as medical test subjects and died from experimental treatments. This has come to be known as the Yemenite Children Affair. The broader Mizrahi Jewish population was often relegated to lower socioeconomic status, faced systemic discrimination, and were marginalized within the new Israeli state, with Ashkenazi Jews occupying higher positions in society. So when Ethan just chalks this complex situation up to mere mutual expulsion, he overlooks all the factors involved in pulling Arab Jews to Israel over the course of years. All that said, this context doesn't change the outcome. Jewish immigrants displaced Palestinians, took their land and property, and subjected them to an ongoing occupation. It's unacceptable, no matter the reason for their arrival and no matter how the Israeli government worked to reshape its population. Over the past 18 months, many videos have resurfaced of Ethan Klein and his wife, Ela, engaging in dehumanizing conversations regarding Palestinian people, literally referring to a Palestinian person as it at one point.
I walked with them to one house.
Okay.
I did get out of the car once, but surrounded with them. So.
Okay. Did they arrest anyone that night?
They did.
Did they bring it in the same car with you?
No.
Oh,
different car. There's a few cars going.
Damn, that's crazy. Was it like? How did you feel? Was it horrifying?
It was strange.
They've also revealed a double standard in the way they view Westerners versus the way they view people from the Middle East. For example, Ethan loves to accuse Hassan of being a terrorist supporter, and one of the reasons he makes this claim is because Hassan interviewed a young 19-year-old man from Yemen. At the time, Hassan was under the impression that the teenager was part of the Houthis, and he wanted to conduct an interview with him. It later turned out that he was not, in fact, a Houthi, but that revelation didn't matter to Ethan or Muda or Nux, and they all ran with the talking point that Hassan promoted a quote-unquote terrorist. Apart from the term terrorist being a highly contentious label, often used as a political tool to delegitimize groups resisting oppression while legitimizing the violence of oppressive states, let's zoom out a bit and look at the history of Yemen. Yemen is one of the poorest countries in the Middle East. It has been the victim of a genocidal campaign waged by a coalition of Gulf states, headed by Saudi Arabia and supported by the West. Israel's intentions align heavily with those of the Saudi-led coalition and is viewed as an outpost for Western hegemony in the Middle East. It is not exactly inconceivable why a 19-year-old from Yemen might be anti-Zionist, especially as the state of Israel is in the middle of committing a genocide. When this young man was asked by Hassan if he was anti-Semitic or simply in opposition to the ethno-religious supremacist idea that is Zionism, he confirmed the latter.
Ask him what he thinks about the fact that in America, some of the leading groups that are pro-Palestine are led by Jewish people who are anti-Israel. How does he feel about that?
He's saying anyone that supports Palestine, we're with.
He's done so many times back when he was active on Twitter. I did not mean the Jews, but the Zionists. I respect every Muslim, Jew, who stands with the truth, and I will do everything I can to protect him. Ethan's arguments as to why this kid is a terrorist are silly. First, he says the kid is a Houthi.
This Houthi pirate, I mean, who are you kidding? This guy's a fucking terrorist.
Even though we don't have concrete evidence to back that claim. In fact, Rashid, the Yemeni guy, denies being a Houthi.
Actual pirate, a actual criminal.
Fucking terrorist.
Second, the teen has tweeted violent things about Zionism, but as we've already seen, the kid is clearly able to distinguish between Zionists and Jewish people, even acknowledging the many Jewish organizations that support the Palestinian cause.
He's saying anyone that supports Palestine, we're with.
And finally, Ethan's smoking gun is an Instagram comment where someone asks this young man if he's a soldier, and he replies, yes. I don't think this is enough to substantiate the accusations Ethan has levied against him. Let's really quickly contrast Ethan's feelings about this Yemeni teen with his praise of Sam Hyde, a guy who Ethan even admits is probably a neo-Nazi.
Sam is an extraordinarily funny guy that inspired me a lot when I was coming up. But he's also he's just a little crazy. That's, and also extremely right-wing. And potentially a Nazi as well.
I mean, I might be overthinking it, but Ethan seems to be strangely charitable when it comes to Sam Hyde, but none of that charitability transfers over to this Yemeni kid. In Ethan's eyes, he's just an irrational anti-Semite, but Sam is just a little weird and potentially a Nazi.
Indians are being used to replace white people.
Damn, maybe the Stalinists were right about Leon Trotsky being a fascist. Ethan is also very charitable in his coverage of Asmongold.
What about Asmon? Because he's juicing hard on Trump.
But he's pro-Trump, isn't he?
Oh my God, is he?
I wouldn't say he's...
I have to imagine, right?
I don't think he's pro-Trump explicitly, overtly. I know people try to say that. I think he definitely leans more conservative, but I don't think he's as conservative as people try to paint him out to be.
Inferior culture in all ways.
Well, let's see.
Asmon is Trump killed it.
He's Trump coded. That's
no, Trump killed it.
What?
Trump killed.
That sounds pretty pro-Trump.
He said Trump what?
Killed it.
Oh, killed it.
In other words, we'll execute the baby.
I think I would say he's Trump coded.
Trump's good at this. ...
I've watched his content. It's not.
That was said sarcastically.
It's not super pro-Trump. He's Trump coded though.
Ethan minimizes Asmongold's role as a dangerous propagandist for the right and doesn't even mention his weird comments about the Holocaust.
The Holocaust probably happened.
But when it comes to Rashid, no charitability whatsoever. In the span of a few months, Ethan has praised or done some form of apologia for both Sam Hyde and Asmongold. This seriously makes me reconsider whether or not Ethan actually gives a fuck about anti-Semitism.
I mean, I could take these guys a little bit more seriously if it wasn't for this curly ass shit. Like these fucking double curls.
Yeah, that is disgusting.
Or if his priorities lie mainly in using the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as a proxy to attack content creators who are critical of him. Anti-Semitism is absolutely on the rise. A cursory scroll through platforms like Twitter will confirm that. But instead of targeting the actual culprits of anti-Semitism, Ethan is too busy doing apologia for them while solely targeting anti-Zionists. Ethan seems to think that just because the United States labels a group a terrorist organization, that settles the matter. The US, the UK, Israel, and other Western forces are responsible for some of the most horrific atrocities known to man. The number of innocent people the US and Israel kill for political reasons is astronomical, according to Ethan's own definition of terrorism.
What is terrorism? It's intentionally targeting civilian population for political goals.
Israel, the US, and other Western nations would top the list. If Ethan truly despises terrorism as he claims, why hasn't he done full-length podcasts or videos about Israeli forces airstriking civilian residences in the middle of the night with no warning? Come on, Ethan, I thought you don't like terrorism.
I don't like terrorism. I don't like it. None of it.
Why doesn't he address the systematic use of rape and sexual violence by Israeli forces against Palestinians? In fact, he's engaged in rape denialism when it comes to this issue.
That's a huge claim. 15 Palestinian women were raped.
Mm-hmm.
I was sexually abused in photographs, she said. But like, what? I don't know what this is. What is this?
What do you mean?
Is this a source?
You're asking if it's credible.
Yeah.
Yes, CARE is credible. I think, at least.
What is
CARE is
There's
the
no source. There's like nothing here. Like shit. I mean, that's a pretty extraordinary claim. I mean, fuck. Like it's serious to say that the Israeli apparatus is using rape systemically.
Has Ethan done a full-length segment denouncing the right to rape protests in Israel, where people protested for the literal right to sexually abuse Palestinian prisoners without consequence? Maybe he did, and I just missed it. Has he mentioned the thousands of unjustly incarcerated Palestinians arrested on dubious security claims and subjected to this violence? For context, the security prisoner designation in Israel is widely criticized as an inhumane and politically motivated label used to justify the mistreatment of thousands of Palestinians. Under this system, Palestinians, many of them minors, can be detained indefinitely without charge or trial through administrative detention, subjected to military courts with conviction rates of over 99%, and denied basic legal rights. The label often conflates nonviolent political activism with terrorism, stripping detainees of the protections afforded to political prisoners under international law. This framework has enabled systematic abuses, including solitary confinement, denial of family visits, and torture during interrogations. So although I do not condone everything the Houthis have done, and I will never support any acts of violence against innocent civilians or human rights abuses, no matter who commits them, when it comes to standing up against Israel's genocide of the Palestinians, they are on the right side of history. They're willing to do something about a genocide, while others just spew their bullshit from Bel Air. To use an analogy that might resonate with Ethan, I think it's safe to say that Ethan probably doesn't think highly of the Soviets. But I'd be willing to bet that if I told him how they took out 80% of the Nazis, he would agree with me that they were the good guys in that situation. According to international law, parties to the Genocide Convention are obligated to do what they can to prevent a genocide wherever it may occur. Yemen is a party to the convention, and the Houthis, who hold the most political power in the country, are attempting to fulfill that obligation by disrupting shipping and trade to economically pressure Israel and help stop the genocide of Palestinians. Legal arguments aside, I'd argue that the force trying to stop this mass slaughter has the moral high ground in this instance. Speaking of terrorism, specifically the definition Ethan himself uses, it's hard to ignore the fact that his own wife fits that description. This isn't exactly breaking news, many people have pointed this out before, but the facts remain. Ethan's wife, Ela, served in the IDF, an organization widely condemned for its role in terrorizing and illegally occupying Palestinian land. More than that, she chose to leave her role as a secretary and requested a transfer to Ramallah, an occupied Palestinian city. Why, you might ask? Because she was bored.
Forced up. Because what did you do? What was your role in the military?
At first, I was given a role that was like in an office somewhat close to my house in Tel Aviv.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of like going to a day job in an office.
So secretary.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it was super boring and I really hated it. So I tried to change my role. I filled out that form and I tried it, and then I somehow ended up in a better place that I liked a lot more. Before, it was a daily thing where you go back home every day, and the new one was in a way that was a base that was far from my house. So you go there for the whole week, and then you come back for the weekend.
So you preferred that? Were you gone for a whole week?
I did.
Interesting. Why?
It was kind of like just more of an adventure, more of a different experience that I preferred than to just go to a boring job, sit on the computer, and go back home at the end of every day. I don't know.
Were you doing secretary work there?
So I was in Dukhifat, which is like a brigade, I guess, that's in charge of the area of Ramallah. And that brigade has like a main officer. So I was his secretary.
She voluntarily moved into an occupied territory to assist in military raids on Palestinian communities, not out of duty, but out of personal dissatisfaction with a desk job. She even referred to Ramallah as a terrorist city.
You told me once you went on like a mission with them to like a terrorist city.
Yeah.
That was kind of a crazy story.
Yeah, my officers and like the soldiers in that brigade, they would go every night on a raid in Ramallah to arrest terrorists.
While ignoring the fact that her presence as an IDF member facilitating raids in the city of Ramallah makes her the occupier and the one terrorizing people.
Did you have a gun on you?
I didn't.
You were not supposed to leave.
No, yeah, not really. But even if I mean, I walked with them to one house.
Okay.
I did get out of the car once, but surrounded with them. So.
Okay. Did they arrest anyone that night?
They did.
Did they bring it in the same car with you?
No.
Oh,
You
different car.
there's a few cars going.
Damn, that's crazy. Was it like? How did you feel? Was it horrifying?
It was strange. Very, very weird.
How so?
You see people in their house, and then it's like the soldiers just walk into the house and look through their shit and find guns, and the whole thing is really surreal.
Fast forward to the present day, and Hila Klein has the gall to say this about the people of the city she terrorized.
I think if you, as an Israeli, go to Ramallah, they'll kill you.
What do you mean you think?
I think I'm saying if you go there as Israeli, you take the turn there, you'll be died. They'll kill you.
It's not only killed, it's like lynched.
As if the occupied are the villains and not the occupiers. Ethan deliberately avoids engaging with this issue. Whenever it's brought up, he deflects by attacking a straw man, insisting that people just don't understand that his wife was a victim of mandatory conscription. But what he refuses to acknowledge is her conscious decision to transfer to a more adventurous role within the IDF, one where she actively participated in terrorizing innocent people. He constantly plays this card while ignoring the severity of her actions. He even had Mutahar on his show, who also basically reduced this controversy down to, Hila did mandatory service, so why are these crazy lefties so mad?
Every time I see like the anti-Hila train coming out there, it's like, so she did mandatory service, okay, now she's like a fucking baby killer or something, right? Like it's just it's one of those things where it's like massive jump in logic, you know, and nobody sits down and explains it.
Nobody sits down and explains it. Hi, Mutahar. I'm sitting down and I'm explaining it. Service in the IDF is bad across the board. Conscientious objectors like Tal Mitnick are based, and contrary to popular belief, he didn't have his life ruined by refusing to aid a genocidal military. But apart from that, Hila purposely left her desk job to engage in raids in illegally occupied territory because she was bored. Hope that clears it up. Also, since you don't take kindly to people speaking insensitively about military personnel, why didn't you call out your buddy Ethan when you were on his podcast and had the chance?
I'm personally looking forward to the podiatrist with PTSD from the Iraq War. I'm not like a military simp. I don't get the whole thank you for your service thing. Yo, I can see the podiatrist with the PTSD. He's sitting there looking at someone's foot, and then he has a flashback, and then the foot is severed. This isn't like World War II. You weren't drafted. You signed up to do a fucking job. You're being paid. You're there.
And the job,
you know what it was. I mean, nobody thanked me and my ass, or nobody thanked the fucking cashier at McDonald's for their service.
And the output is not good.
He's holding a severed foot because he's a flashback to Iraq War. His homie got blown up. Sorry about not having health care for you. Sorry about the burn pits. The good news is we will be putting a tiny little toothpick flag on your grave. What'd they die for?
So we could have Monday off work.
Worth it. Shit, we need more troops to... No, I'm kidding.
But when someone wearing a hijab says similar shit...
Such vile fucking disgusting language.
Oh, how out of touch do you gotta be? How privileged do you gotta be to sit
These SlopTube guys stand for absolutely nothing. They have spines made out of gelatin. The only way I can begin to understand the cognitive dissonance Ethan displays is by accepting the fact that he applies a different set of rules to non-Westerners than he does to Westerners. Hila went out of her way to unnecessarily facilitate and ride along on raids in occupied territory, and she's not a terrorist, but this young Yemeni man who has endured nothing but death and destruction at the behest of Western-backed forces for his entire life is a terrorist because he hates the people who hate him. Alright, Ethan loves to throw around the terms terrorist and anti-Semite. He especially likes to direct those terms toward Hassan Piker, which I personally think is incredibly dishonest given that Hassan has time and time again denounced anti-Semitism for the evil that it is and highlighted how it differs from anti-Zionism.
Israel's doing this, yes.
The Jews.
Well, Israel's doing it, not the Jews doing
Jewish
it.
people, right?
No, it's not. It's
They're not.
So one thing you have to understand is that like
a difference.
There is a major difference because like what Saudi Arabia does is not about Islam. You know, it's not like ISIS is doing what they're doing for Islam. You know what I mean? I'm Muslim. I don't those guys, but either of those guys. You know what I mean?
But isn't Zionism? I'm so confused.
It's understandable that you're confused in this circumstance because like
so Israel's
both
not Jewish.
The Nazis who hate Israel or love Israel, doesn't matter, that believe that Israel must exist or believe that Israel must go away and that Jews control the media or whatever, like both the Nazis and also Israel and Kanye, and also Israel itself claims that Israel is doing this for Judaism. And that if you criticize Israel, like I'm doing right now, I'm an anti-Semitic person. So because of that reason, a lot of people like yourself get confused. You're like, so the Jews are doing this? No.
Ethan, on the other hand, when he's not being blatantly anti-Semitic himself,
There's like stinky suit where like, bro, you have to be very generous to a Hasidic Jew.
Loves to conflate the idea of Zionism with Judaism, not realizing the disservice that does to Judaism. Judaism is a beautiful ancient religion whose followers have been unjustly persecuted throughout history. Zionism, on the other hand, is a nationalist supremacist ideology. Its own founder, Theodor Herzl, described it as something colonial and noted that anti-Semites would become useful allies to the Zionist cause. When Ethan blurs the lines between these two fundamentally different ideas, he does a disservice to Judaism by conflating it with an ideology rooted in ethno-religious supremacy and carried out through the ethnic cleansing of Palestine's native inhabitants. So when the Houthis see this conflation made by Zionists, it leads to their horrendous slogan where they use the term Jew instead of Zionist. This happens because the Zionist project and its useful idiots have done everything possible to blur the lines between these two ideologies, even though they should remain distinct. That conflation fuels real anti-Semitism, and Ethan bears some responsibility for perpetuating it. If we go back to the Yemeni teenager we mentioned earlier, it is true that he has used the term Jew in a terrible way.
Here he is singing a song with the words, "Do you threaten us with what we are waiting for, son of a Jew?"
But it's also true that Zionists in the Israeli state have deliberately worked to blur the lines between Judaism and Zionism.
I feel I am representing all the citizens of Israel, even those who do not agree with me, a representative of the entire Jewish people.
As Theodor Herzl himself pointed out, the more anti-Semitism rises as a result of this conflation, the more the Israeli state can justify its existence as a supposed safe haven for Jewish people. But as we saw with our guy from Yemen, when Hassan explained that many Jewish people actively support the Palestinian cause, he embraced them without hesitation. That's not anti-Semitism rooted in some deep-seated hatred of Jewish people. It's anger at those who weaponize Jewish identity to shield an ethno-nationalist project that has devastated countless Arab lives. When Jewish American political scientist Norman Finkelstein, whose parents survived the Holocaust, was challenged over his support for the Houthis, he said this:
I totally support the Houthis as a Jew. You said that, Norm.
Yeah.
Totally. The Houthi flag says, God is the greatest, death to America, death to Israel, a curse upon the Jews, victory to Islam.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, how do you reconcile this?
I have no problem reconciling it for this very simple reason, and you'll allow me, you can disagree, I have no problem with that. From my first conscious moments in my own life, okay, my parents loathed the Germans. They didn't loathe the Nazis. They hated the Germans. Now, my parents were very decent human beings. The apple did not fall far from the tree. But I could understand that sentiment. The only Jews the Houthis have known are the Israelis. It's a regrettable fact that they don't know, have never experienced any other kinds of Jews. Do I wish the Houthis were more discriminating in their slogans? Of course I wish it. But do I understand where it comes from? Yes. And will that slogan of theirs color my appreciation of the fact that alone among the world's peoples, they are resorting to armed force to stop the genocide in Gaza? I have to ask myself the question, how would my parents have felt if this ragtag army happened to be situated on a point in the world's map where they could inflect the outcome of the final solution? And these people, this ragtag people, hailing back to the Middle Ages, they were investing all of their physical resources and moral energy to stopping the extermination. How would my parents react? Would they ask, what are their political slogans? I don't think so.
Ethan is now 18 months into his crusade against anyone to his left. He's used the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as a backdrop for his drama-driven attack videos, even as the genocide of Palestinians continues. His desperation to own his perceived enemies leads him to say things that are reprehensible. Case in point, he's once proudly announced he'd take his family to Israel and film how wonderful it is for his audience to see.
What I want to do is show you guys how I see Israel, because you don't see that when you listen to Hassan and you hear all these fucking mega lefties talking about it like it's some super racist, crazy, like Jim Crow style of society. Like, I can't wait to show you guys how beautiful, how multicultural, how like free it feels for people, or just it's a beautiful place. It is. It's one of the most diverse places I've ever been.
Let's be clear. He said this about a country actively committing genocide, and as a white Jewish man, his experience there won't reflect the reality for Palestinians. Now, Ethan would refute my characterization of his statement by saying that he was referring to Israel proper.
You guys, how I see Israel, because you don't see that when you listen to Hassan and you hear all these fucking mega lefties talking about it like it's some super racist,
Oh my God, bro! You have no idea what you're talking about.
He's now talking
I'm
about
talking about Israel proper.
However, my criticism still stands. Apart from the fact that the Israeli state is actively committing genocide and praising even parts of it while this is happening is insane, Israel proper is not lacking in its discriminatory practices. There are tons, ranging from discriminatory planning and building laws, particularly in the Negev and in the Galilee. There are land laws that prioritize Jewish people, the anti-terror laws that disproportionately surveil and affect Arabs. Take the 2018 nation-state law, which declares Israel the nation-state of the Jewish people exclusively, downgrades Arabic from an official language, and promotes Jewish settlement as a national value. The implications of this law marginalize minorities. I don't blame Ethan for not exactly cluing into this oppression, but that's a testament to his privilege and ignorance, not the multiculturalism and tolerance of Israel.
We should move to Israel to spite them.
Ethan has admitted that he doesn't take criticism well. He deflects, shuts down, lashes out, and completely ceases to think critically.
When I'm criticized, I psychologically shut down. Obviously, I get super defensive and super irritable and super aggressive towards those that criticize me in a way that's not healthy. And instead of learning from criticism, deflecting it all the time and making it the world's problem and not mine, right?
From taking aim at pro-Palestinian creators like Matt Lieb, who himself is a Jewish man, to doxing random Instagram users.
This one's real. We caught you, Joe. Public-facing account.
Hey, Joe.
I see you. You wanted to be cute? Let's see it. Nice mustache. Strong entry. Here he is. If anyone, let's see if I know, can identify him at all.
Oh shit! That weenie truck he's in front of. That's in Dearborn.
Here's his mom. I'm not gonna clip that for her. Oh, no, you know what? Fuck him. This is what you. Here's your mom. I wonder if she knows what you do on social media on your free time. You love your mama. Good thing she's not Jewish, eh, Joe?
Recently, Ethan declared that Hassan Piker should go to Gaza to do some journalism. When Ethan was greeted with the rebuttal that being a journalist in Gaza is incredibly dangerous, he and Ela downplayed the reality that Israel targets and kills journalists.
I can't get any security assurances against Israel, obviously.
Well, bro, it's not like Israel
that is worried.
Look, it's not like Israel's going to do a precision strike on Hassan. They don't fucking.
Yeah,
but it is dangerous. It's a war zone. Like, I agree, it's dangerous.
They might. It's a war zone.
They may.
But what?
He was in the running for anti-Semite of the year. They may.
Nah,
I don't think you guys understand Israel. It doesn't work like that.
They're not. It's not. But regardless, I agree. It's dangerous, right?
Yeah.
It's dangerous in a war zone,
right?
Not because Israel will target him.
I don't think it's like that personally.
Claiming that, yes, going to Gaza would be dangerous, but that's because there's a war going on there, not because Israeli forces would purposefully target a journalist. They would never. Now, apart from the fact that constantly calling a genocide a war is a form of genocide denial and obfuscates the reality that a genocide and a war can occur concurrently, as is recognized by international law, and as we've seen in Srebrenica in 1995, Israel does in fact target journalists, medics, humanitarian workers, and so forth. Hundreds of journalists have been killed by Israeli forces since October 7th, 2023, some of which were literally burned alive. This is an issue that predates the current genocide in Gaza. There are infamous cases like that of Rachel Corrie, an American journalist who was run over by an Israeli bulldozer in 2003. Her death was then mocked by members of the IDF who made Rachel Corrie pancakes. Apart from just journalists, other volunteers or workers aren't safe either. In March of 2025, Israeli forces killed 15 Palestinian medics and buried them in a mass grave, and the list goes on and on and on. Will the H3 podcast ever retract their statements that Israel doesn't target journalists? Will they ever issue a correction? Will Ethan ever admit that he was wrong to attribute the entire death toll of the Syrian civil war to Hezbollah?
I said Hezbollah has killed a shit more load of Arabs than IDF has. You're saying that's not true? Because Hezbollah is credited with about 500,000 deaths in Syria.
Will H3 ever dedicate an episode to documenting the Israeli war crimes committed against the Palestinian people? Will they ever dedicate a full-length segment to talk about the wrongful persecution of innocent advocates for the Palestinian cause? People like Mahmoud Khalil, Mozen Madawi, or Romizia Ozturk. The H3 podcast is a very well-known program and has the ability to really highlight the degree to which pro-Palestinian advocates are wrongfully targeted, but the H3 podcast is too busy targeting them themselves. However, when it comes to pumping out episode after episode about how Hassan or other pro-Palestinian advocates like Noah Samson are bad, they're quick to turn on those cameras and start talking shit, and recently, even getting a little litigious. This whole situation has made one thing painfully clear. Ethan is absolutely desperate for drama. I mean, his whole show has always included elements of laughing at others instead of with them. He's even taken to creating this new segment where he makes fun of aspiring musicians on Instagram. But unfortunately, Ethan's bullying has transcended petty shit like that. He's now taken the most urgent humanitarian crisis of our time and turned it into an endless stream of hit pieces on people he dislikes. To wrap this up, one last example of how Ethan benefits from his role as a drama slop creator, whether he realizes it or not, is how his audience uses his just a silly internet guy persona to run defense for him.
Bro is still obsessing over Ethan, not like he makes a comedy podcast. I don't know. I don't think it's really funny to do genocide defense over and over again.
His fans push the narrative that since he's just a comedian, he shouldn't be treated as what he truly is, a dangerous source of misinformation with an ego so massive that it prevents him from issuing corrections or engaging in any adequate form of introspection.
And instead of learning from criticism, deflecting it all the time and making it the world's problem and not mine, right?
This is what I mean by weaponized ignorance. When massive creators with millions of subscribers cover contentious issues with half-truths, omissions, or outright lies, it's on the rest of us to call that out and hold them accountable. Ethan says he apologizes for everything he gets wrong and insists he never defends Israel.
Can you name one thing I've said in defense of Israel? Just one. Just one thing I've said in defense of Israel. Or like in defense of the IDF, really. I mean, you could defend Israel.
He even bragged that his wife apologized for calling international war criminal Yoav Gallant a really good guy and claimed that he and his wife have no issue owning their mistakes.
You know, that's how mature people do. That's how you're supposed to handle yourself, isn't it? Like, what more do you want me to do?
I have no problem apologizing and admitting and whatever is needed when things happen.
So, Ethan, feel free to correct the record on your claims about Israel not targeting journalists, about Israel proper being a multicultural wonderland, about calling Ramallah a terrorist city while ignoring the fact that it's under illegal military occupation by a force known for actual terrorism, and the rest of the issues I laid out. For the record, I see no reason to hold things over someone's head if they sincerely apologize. The issue with Ethan is that he spreads so much disinformation, and whenever he's called out for it, he just attacks his critics instead of actually apologizing. So his bloviating about how mature he and Hila are when it comes to taking responsibility is, frankly, insulting. It's understandable why everything tends to get transformed into internet drama slop content, even topics that deserve more respect and responsibility than the medium of beef videos can offer. But one thing we can't afford to downplay is the fact that these drama videos are unfolding while a genocide looms in the background. Don't forget that, no matter how much Ethan Klein and his contemporaries obfuscate that reality.